Welcome to the Jeep Dive. We're here to unpack complex stories and get to the core insights.
And today we are definitely diving deep into a case that's just incredibly tangled, the killing of Jason Corbett, an Irish businessman in North Carolina back in 2015.
Yeah, this one, it crosses continents, involves intense family drama, a really brutal killing, and then this whole legal roller coaster.
Exactly. The sources are, well, they're all over the place sometimes. You've got a marriage that clearly fell apart, a custody battle that got desperate, a murder conviction that seems solid.
And then overturned, followed by this plea deal for voluntary manslaughter. It's a lot.
It is. So our job today is really to sift through it all. The evidence, the psychology, especially that custody angle, and figure out how the legal system went from a 20-year murder sentence to, well, early release.
It really makes you look at how procedure can sometimes, overshadow the raw facts of a case.
Okay, so let's ground ourselves in the basics. August 2nd, 2015, Wahlberg, North Carolina. Jason Corbett, he's 39, dies from blunt force trauma.
Inflicted by his wife, Molly Martins Corbett, and her father, Thomas Martins, who, importantly, was a retired FBI agent.
Right. They were convicted of second-degree murder in 2017, sentenced to minimum 20, maximum 25 years.
And this is the twist we need to understand, those convictions got tossed out on appeal.
Mm-hmm. And in 2023, they took a plea deal,
No.
voluntary manslaughter, which meant considering time already served.
They walked free in 2024 under supervision. It's a massive reduction. So to grasp that outcome, we really need to rewind and look at the years leading up to that night.
Absolutely. You have to start with Jason's life before Molly. Back in Limerick, Ireland, he was married to Margaret Fitzpatrick Maggs.
Right. And tragically, Maggs died very suddenly in 2006. It was just after their daughter, Sarah, was born.
Yeah, the accounts say it was a severe asthma attack. His sister Catherine was apparently there, saw her struggling with the inhaler while Jason was trying desperately to help.
And that detail asthma, it becomes so critical later, because the story Molly Martins apparently told people in the U.S. was completely different.
It was. According to the sources, mainly Jason's family, Molly told friends Maggs died of cancer. She even, bizarrely, claimed they were pen pals before Maggs died.
Which is just impossible. It's not just getting a detail wrong. It feels like a deliberate fabrication. Like she was trying to write herself into the family history, create this connection that never existed.
It points to a pattern, maybe. This alleged pattern of deceit is really the context for how she enters the family. She gets hired as the au pair in Ireland, April 2008.
Then she marries Jason, and they move to Lexington, North Carolina in 2011. But Jason's family, especially his sister Tracy Lynch, they documented a lot of concerns about Molly's behavior even before the move.
Yeah, they described her as a fantasist, basically. Claims of being an Olympic swimmer, a qualified Montessori teacher.
Even fostering a child previously, things that apparently weren't true.
Right, but the most significant thing she hid, according to the sources, was her psychiatric history.
This is really key, isn't it?
It seems to be. The records confirm she was released from a secure psychiatric unit at Emory University Hospital in Georgia just weeks before flying to Ireland to meet Jason and take the au pair job.
And she didn't tell Jason about this until right before the wedding.
Apparently not. Which, you have to think about the implications of that choice. What does it say about her willingness to manage perceptions, perhaps?
And this alleged manipulation seems to have continued, even intensified, once they were in the U.S.
The sources claim she actively deceived neighbors about the children, telling people Sarah was her biological daughter.
I mean, the story about her describing her difficult labor at a Bible study meeting, it's incredibly detailed deception, if true. She was building this whole false narrative for her new American life.
Yeah, and while she's allegedly doing this, Jason is footing the bill. He paid, $390,000 for the house with money from his Limerick home sale?
Gave her $80,000 for furniture, bought her a BMW SUV.
And significantly paid $49,000 towards the wedding directly to her father, Thomas Martins.
Okay, so he's investing financially. But the marriage itself sounds like it was incredibly strained from the start. And it all circled back to the kids, Jack and Sarah.
Everything seemed to. Molly desperately wanted to adopt them, get them American citizenship.
But Jason refused.
He did. He got them green cards so they could live in the U.S. legally through his job, but he insisted they keep their Irish passports.
Why was that so important to him?
His brother John explained it later. Jason was deeply worried about what would happen to the kids if he died unexpectedly. He didn't trust Molly or her family to send them back to Ireland to be raised by his sister, Tracy, as his will stipulated.
So the kids' legal status, their nationality, It was a constant source of tension, a real battleground.
Definitely. And Jason wasn't just worrying hypothetically. He was apparently making plans to go back to Ireland, maybe retire early, open a pizza place in County Clare.
Tracy Lynch confirmed this, right? She saw the adoption push as a direct threat to Jason's plan to take the kids home.
Yeah. And Molly's actions before the killing seem to back up this focus on custody over, say, reconciliation.
What do you mean?
Court records show she sought legal advice about her custody rights if they divorced back in the summer of 2013.
Okay.
And then she spoke to a lawyer again in late 2014, specifically about her rights to the children. It suggests her priority was securing the kids legally, whatever happened to the marriage.
Which sets a really grim stage for the final days. The family called it psychological warfare.
And the worst example, corroborated by Sarah Corbett herself later, was Molly allegedly telling the children that their father, Jason, had actually killed their mother, Mags.
That's just unimaginably cruel. Poisoning the children against their father right when things were falling apart.
And then came the incident that seemed to be the breaking point for Jason.
The fat shaming incident.
Yeah, a friend recounted that just days before he died, Jason left a party early because Molly started mocking his weight in front of everyone, hitting him where he was most sensitive.
Tracy Lynch called that the last straw. He was done. He was going back to Ireland with the kids, without Molly.
And the evidence suggests he'd even packed a bag that night. So picture the scene. He's about to leave, taking the children, cutting her off from them, and likely a significant life insurance policy.
That creates an incredibly powerful, immediate motive for what happened next, doesn't it? She stood to lose absolutely everything she'd seemingly lied and manipulated to get.
Okay, let's shift to the incident itself. Early hours, August 2nd. The narrative starts with Thomas Martin's 911 call, 3 a.m.
And he says he intervened in a fight between Jason and Molly and Slimthy. His words were, may have killed him.
Right. Both he and Molly immediately frame it as a domestic disturbance, trying to set up that self-defense angle from the very first moment.
Thomas Martins, the ex-FBI guy, gave a pretty detailed account to the police pretty quickly.
He did. Claimed he heard Molly scream, grabbed an aluminum baseball bat, which he said was a gift he kept nearby, went into the dark master bedroom, and saw Jason strangling Molly.
And he claimed he only hit Jason after Molly had already hit him with a paving stone.
That was his story. Molly, in her statement, backed that up, saying she tried to hit Jason with a brick paver she kept on her nightstand.
Okay, a paving stone or brick on the nightstand? That already sounds a bit odd.
It does. And she also claimed Jason had been abusive before. But the prosecution immediately pointed out she never reported any of it. Never told hospital staff about alleged injuries. The lack of prior documentation raised red flags about this sudden, violent incident.
And then things start happening after the incident that look, well, suspicious. Actions that seem aimed at controlling the scene and the narrative.
Hugely suspicious. The cleanup effort is maybe the most glaring example.
The $5,500 industrial cleanup.
Yeah. Within hours of being released, Molly allegedly hires professionals to scrub the house of blood traces before forensics could do a thorough job. I mean, if it was purely self-defense, why sanitize the scene so aggressively?
It looks like destroying evidence. And it wasn't just the house, was it? She tried to have Jason cremated immediately.
Right. Authorities had to step in to stop her before his family could even fly over from Ireland. They had to rush over just to prevent his remains from being disposed of.
And she only let them see the body after they agreed to pay for the funeral and getting him back to Ireland.
That's what the sources indicate. The level of transactional behavior right after admitting involvement in his death is pretty stark.
Sarah Corbett later described the Martins family's behavior around the memorial as bizarre barbecues, swimming pool, while Jason's family was grieving.
Yeah, that reported disconnect between the supposed trauma they'd endured and their actions afterwards was noted by several people. It didn't quite add up.
Let's talk about the physical state of Jason's body when help arrived. The paramedics' testimony seems crucial here.
Absolutely critical. David Bent and Amanda Hackworth, they arrived fast, less than 10 minutes after the 911 call.
And they both noticed his body temperature.
Yeah. Remarkably cool, Bent said. Hackworth used the word alarming to describe how cool his body felt.
Okay, so if he's already remarkably cool, just minutes after the 911 call supposedly ended the fight.
It strongly implies the assault happened much earlier, maybe minutes, maybe even longer. Before they actually called 911, it directly contradicts their story of calling immediately after the struggle.
And the 911 call itself, the dispatcher found Thomas Martins strangely calm.
Karen Capps, yeah. 16 years experience. She testified he sounded surprisingly calm during that almost 14-minute call.
Even though he claimed he'd just done over 400 CPR compressions, which would be exhausting.
Right. Now, the defense could argue, well, he's ex-FBI, trained for stress.
Sure.
But you combine that calmness with the cool body, the frantic cleaning.
Yeah.
It starts to look less like spontaneous self-defense and more like a staged event where they got the scene arranged before making the call.
Which leads directly into the next major conflict, custody of the children.
Jason's will was clear. His sister, Tracy Lynch, was named as guardian, and he hadn't changed that will after marrying Molly.
But Molly filed for custody anyway, just days after Jason died.
She did, claiming she'd raised them for 8 years, that she was their mother figure.
How did the court respond to that?
Swiftly and decisively against her. Judge Brian Shipwash, who handled the guardianship hearing, was blunt. He later described her attitude as a deranged entitlement to the children.
Wow.
He said he was genuinely fearful she might harm them and made their immediate return to Ireland the top priority. They were flown back within days, out of her reach.
And her instability seemed to continue after losing the kids? There was a car crash.
Yeah, about a month later, mid-August 2015, Molly crashed her car into a neighbor's brick mailbox in Knoxville. Witnesses said she seemed impaired, distraught about the children.
And Thomas Martin stepped in again.
He did. He apparently paid the neighbor directly for the damage, so the police weren't involved. No official report of her state of mind or potential impairment right after the killing.
Another instance of controlling the narrative, perhaps?
It looks that way. And Molly didn't just give up. She kept trying to reach the kids, posting their pictures on Facebook for months, sometimes with contact info.
Trying to maintain some connection, however inappropriate.
Until the Corbett family had to send a cease and desist letter, it really paints a picture of someone unwilling to accept the loss of control.
Okay, so fast forward to 2017, the first trial begins. But before the main evidence, there was this really significant fight over the children's statements.
Yes, this became incredibly important later for the appeal. So initially, right after Jason's death, social services interviewed the kids. Sarah mentioned Jason having anger issues. And Jack claimed he saw Jason assault Molly.
Which sounds like it would have been very helpful for the defense's self-defense claim.
Potentially, yes. But then, 9 months later, Jack completely reversed his story. In a follow-up video interview with the sheriff's office, he said Molly had coached him before that first interview, told him to make up stories about Jason being abusive.
So now the defense has a problem. Their helpful statement has been recanted with an accusation of coaching.
Exactly. The defense tried to get Jack's recantation thrown out as hearsay, but the trial judge, Judge Lee, made a really crucial decision.
What was that?
He ruled that none of the children's statements, not the initial ones alleging abuse, nor Jack's recantation could be used as evidence in the trial. He wanted to protect the kids.
But that decision, excluding those initial statements, ultimately became the reason the conviction was overturned years later.
Precisely. It was a well-intentioned ruling with devastating consequences for the prosecution down the line.
Okay, so without the kids' statements, what did the prosecution focus on in the 2017 trial?
They hammered home the physical evidence, arguing it showed malice, the intent needed for second-degree murder, not self-defense.
The crime scene itself was pretty damning for the Martins, right? Jason naked, covered in blood, Molly and Thomas basically unharmed.
Right. Lieutenant Young, the crime scene examiner, testified he saw Molly rubbing her neck, but found no actual marks or injuries when he photographed her. He even told her to stop rubbing it for the photos. It suggested she might be performing injury.
And then there was the trazodone.
Ah, yes. The sedative. The autopsy found it in Jason's system. He didn't have a prescription for it.
But Molly did.
She did. Medical records showed she'd been prescribed 50-milligram doses for insomnia just 3 days before Jason died.
So the implication is she might have drugged him, made him drowsy or incapacitated before the attack.
That's exactly the implication. If he was sedated, the whole story of him suddenly attacking Molly, forcing Thomas to intervene, it just falls apart. It points towards planning, not a spontaneous fight.
And the sheer brutality of the attack also argued against self-defense.
Definitely. The pathologist counted about 12 blows to the head. He testified that any 8 would have knocked him out, and 4 were individually fatal. His skull was shattered so badly they couldn't even get an exact count.
That level of violence just doesn't square with necessary force, does it?
The prosecution argued it showed excessive force, overkill evidence of malice, not just stopping a threat.
And the blood spatter analysis seemed to support the idea of staging, too.
Dr. Stuart James, yes. His analysis suggested the first blows might have happened while Jason was actually in bed.
How do they determine that?
Blood spatter found inside the quilt, saturation stains on the mattress itself. If he's attacked while lying down, possibly sedated and naked.
Then the story of him standing up and strangling Molly becomes very hard to believe.
Exactly. Dr. James also noted blood drips on a vacuum cleaner, suggesting the scene had been cleaned or altered before police photographed it. More evidence pointing away from a spontaneous event.
Did the prosecution bring up Thomas Martin's feelings about Jason?
They did. They had his former co-worker, Joanne Lowry, testify. She said that about 2 months before the killing, Martins told her, "That son-in-law, I hate him."
Which directly contradicts the defense trying to paint him as just a protective father intervening reluctantly.
Right. It suggested pre-existing animosity, a potential motive beyond just that moment.
Okay, so what was the core of the defense's case?
Thomas Martin's testimony was central. He got on the stand and stuck to his story. Heard screams, saw Jason strangling Molly, feared for their lives, hit Jason with the bat.
Did he admit he disliked Jason or advised Molly to leave him?
He admitted both, yes. But he insisted he acted only because he thought Molly was about to be killed.
And Molly herself? Did she testify?
No, she exercised her right to remain silent. Didn't take the stand.
So the defense focused on arguing lack of malice.
Exactly. They argued the prosecution hadn't proven the specific intent required for second-degree murder. Maybe it was excessive force, maybe manslaughter, but not murder with malice. They also tried to poke holes in the forensics, like pointing out Dr. James hadn't physically visited the scene.
How long did the jury take?
Less than 4 hours. It was quick.
And the verdict?
Unanimous. Guilty of second-degree murder for both Molly and Thomas Martins, sentenced to 20 to 25 years.
What did the jurors say afterwards? Why were they so convinced?
The sources say juror interviews revealed it was primarily the sheer number of blows. It just screamed overkill, not self-defense. One juror specifically called Molly very manipulative, noting she only got emotional when the kids are mentioned, not when looking at photos of Jason's injuries.
And the impact on the children was voiced too, wasn't it?
Yes. Jack Corbett's victim impact statement was read in court. He called Molly a murderer who killed his dad for no reason and said she'd never be part of their family. Apparently, Molly sobbed uncontrollably listening to it.
So, at that point, it seemed like justice, however tragic, had been delivered.
It seemed that way, but the American legal system allows for appeals, and the Martins pursued them vigorously. And that led to the North Carolina Supreme Court decision in 2021.
The one that changed everything.
Completely. A narrow 4-3 majority ruled they had to get a new trial.
And the reason wasn't new evidence, right? It was procedural.
Purely procedural. The Supreme Court agreed with the lower court of appeals. Judge Lee, back in the 2017 trial, had made a mistake by excluding those initial statements from the children, the ones where they alleged abuse by Jason.
Even though Jack later said Molly coached him and recanted those statements.
Even so, the appeals courts argue that those initial statements, true or not, should have been allowed in. Why? Because the defense could have used them to argue about the Martins' state of mind, their alleged fear of Jason, even if the abuse claims were false.
So, excluding potentially false, recanted statements was deemed prejudicial to the defense's ability to argue self-defense.
That was the majority reasoning. It's a complex legal point, but the outcome was simple. The murder convictions were thrown out. The state had to decide whether to retry them for murder.
Wow, that's quite something. Overturning a conviction based on excluded evidence that was likely fabricated and definitely recanted.
It put the prosecution in a very tough spot. A retrial would be expensive, high profile, and now potentially complicated by the children themselves.
How so?
Jack and Sarah, teenagers by this point, made it clear. If the defense tried to use those old false statements about their dad, they were ready to testify against the Martins in the new trial.
So the defense risked having the victims directly refute their narrative on the stand.
Exactly. That threat, plus the cost and uncertainty of a retrial, paved the way for the plea deal in 2023.
The deal for voluntary manslaughter.
Right. Molly pled no contest, Thomas pled guilty. The second-degree murder charges were dropped entirely.
Can you just remind us of the difference again? Why was manslaughter such a win for them?
Sure. Second-degree murder needs malice intent to kill or that reckless disregard for life. Voluntary manslaughter implies killing in the heat of passion or with reduced intent, often provoked.
So, by pleading to manslaughter, they essentially got the state to agree they didn't have to prove malice anymore.
Pretty much. It allowed them to frame the whole thing as a sudden loss of control, sidestepping all the evidence of planning and staging that convinced the first jury.
And the sentence reflected that huge difference.
Dramatically, 51 to 74 months, but since they'd already served over 4 years while appealing.
They only had about 7 more months to serve, a massive reduction from 20-plus years.
And in that 2023 sentencing hearing, the defense went all in on a new narrative.
Focused on Jason's alleged abuse of Molly.
Heavily. They brought in a domestic abuse expert who argued Molly actually had little reason to want Jason dead because his death meant she'd lose the kids anyway.
So the argument was her only motivation was to keep the kids, and the killing was just stopping immediate harm.
That was the defense position presented at sentencing. It was about survival and keeping the children, not malice.
That must have been incredibly painful for Jason's family, especially his first wife's family.
It was. Mags Fitzpatrick's family issued a powerful statement rejecting any insinuation that Jason could have harmed Mags. They reiterated she died from asthma, that Jason tried to save her, and basically condemned the Martins' web of lies.
But the most powerful statements at that hearing came from the children themselves.
Jack and Sarah, now 19 and 17, they stood up in court and spoke directly.
What did they say?
Sarah talked about how Molly devastated their family, showed no remorse, took off her wedding ring right after Jason died, and told Sarah to just get over it.
And Jack, the one Molly allegedly coached.
He called Molly a monster, said she abused him, weaponized his childhood statements to try and escape justice for killing his father. He was explicit. I was used by her. A piece on her chessboard.
How did Molly react to that?
Reports say she, who'd been relatively composed before, sobbed loudly and put her head down on the table while they spoke.
But emotional reactions don't change plea deals.
No, the deal stood. Thomas and Molly Martins were released on June 6, 2024. Just over 4 years served in total.
How did people involved in the original case react?
The former sheriff, David Grice, was blunt, said they got off with a slap on the wrist. He speculated they just threw enough money at appeals until the courts got tired.
And the Corbett family?
Their final statement really captured the frustration. They said Molly put Jack and Sarah into the center of her bid to evade justice with a web of lies, calling her treatment of the grieving children inhumane. It just highlights that gulf between the jury's finding and the final legal action. So when you look back at the whole arc of the Jason Corbett case, it really is a stark example. You have this complex, troubled family dynamic, a incredibly violent death, strong physical evidence pointing one way.
A unanimous jury conviction for murder.
And yet a procedural legal point overturns it all, leading to a plea deal that drastically reframes the crime and reduces the sentence.
Yeah, the first trial was all about malice, staging, overkill. The plea deal hearing focused on custody, desperation, alleged abuse, heat of passion. The core question feels like it never got definitively answered in the legal system. What was the real plan that night? Especially with that evidence of sedation and staging.
Which brings us to one final thought, a theory floated by the former DA Alan Martin in a documentary about the case. It offers a potentially different lens on the Martins' objective that night.
What's the theory?
Martin suggests maybe the immediate goal wasn't murder. Maybe Molly, with her father there as a witness, was trying to stage a severe domestic violence incident.
Stage it. Why?
To get a domestic violence protective order, a DVPO, against Jason.
Okay, and what would that achieve?
If she had a DVPO against him, she'd have a legal grounds to immediately file for emergency temporary custody of Jack and Sarah.
Ah, so the violence wasn't necessarily intended to be fatal, but severe enough to trigger a legal process that would give her control of the kids.
That's the theory. It shifts the motive from immediate malice to a calculated, albeit still violent, legal strategy to secure custody. The killing, in this view, wasn't the plan, but the horrific, excessive result of that staging going terribly wrong.
That's a chilling thought. Was the ultimate goal always about controlling the children, and the brutal assault just the means, however horribly it ended? Something for you, the listener, to consider.